Growing up in a funeral home might sound morbid, but what if it actually teaches you more about living than dying? Today's story profoundly alters our perspective on childhood experiences and the lasting lessons they impart.
That's such a fascinating perspective, especially considering how Butch Hemperly's story reveals the unexpected warmth and humanity he found in what many would consider an unusual childhood setting.
What really strikes me about East Point during that era is this incredible contrast. You had these vibrant streets filled with local shops, movie theaters showing the latest films, kids playing freely in the parks, and right in the middle of all this life was his family's funeral home. The statistics show that back then, about 95% of funeral homes were family owned businesses compared to approximately 60% today.
The community aspect of his story stands out particularly. I mean, the way he describes the Yarbrough family's restaurant and those legendary hamburgers, it's like every business was part of this intricate social tapestry.
And speaking of community, the role of religion was central. Dr. Duncan's sermons at the church weren't just Sunday services, they were these powerful community gatherings. Studies show that in the 1950s and 1960s, church attendance reached its peak with nearly 70% of Americans regularly attending services.
That's fascinating how the religious and secular aspects of life were so intertwined. How do you think that shaped his perspective on death and grieving?
What's really interesting is how he witnessed the massive shift in funeral practices over the decades. We're talking about a transformation from purely religious ceremonies to what we see today, where about 40% of families now choose celebration of life services over traditional funerals. He had this front row seat to a cultural revolution in how we process grief.
The way he describes those changes really highlights how society's relationship with death has evolved. It's almost like watching American culture transform through the lens of a funeral home.
You know what's particularly striking? The family dynamics he observed during times of grief. Research shows that family conflicts often intensify during funeral planning, with about 50% of funeral directors reporting they've witnessed serious family disputes during arrangements.
That must have given him unique insights into human nature, especially since he was exposed to such intense emotional moments from a young age.
Exactly. And it's fascinating how his journey mirrors some of these larger themes. His struggle with alcohol addiction and recovery through AA, that's something that affects about 15 million Americans. It's as if his story is a microcosm of broader societal challenges.
The parallel between finding healing through community in AA and helping others find healing through funeral services is compelling.
Let's also discuss how the funeral industry itself has evolved. Today, the average funeral costs around $7,000 to $12,000, and we're seeing a significant shift toward personalization. About 35% of families now request some form of unique or non traditional element in their services.
That evolution really shows how death rituals reflect broader cultural changes, doesn't it? The way we honor the dead reveals a great deal about how we live.
Absolutely fascinating point. What's particularly telling is the evolution of the role of funeral directors. Studies show that modern funeral directors spend approximately 60% of their time counseling families, rather than handling the technical aspects of the business. It's become increasingly about emotional support rather than just providing a service.
The human element really seems to be at the core of everything in this story, from the community connections to the way grief brings people together.
Looking at the bigger picture, what we're really seeing is how these early experiences shaped his understanding of both life and death. Recent psychological studies suggest that early exposure to death, when handled appropriately, can actually lead to greater emotional resilience and empathy in adulthood.
That's such an important insight. It really challenges our assumptions about protecting children from difficult subjects.
And in the end, isn't that what makes his story so compelling? It's not just about growing up in a funeral home, it's about how unusual circumstances can lead to profound wisdom. The data shows that people who have regular exposure to death often report higher levels of life satisfaction and better emotional coping skills.
So well put. His story really demonstrates how the most unexpected childhood experiences can shape our understanding of what it means to be human.
Looking ahead, I believe his story has significant implications for how we perceive death and community in contemporary society, with more than 60% of Americans now saying they want their funeral to be a celebration of life rather than a mourning of death. Maybe we're finally catching up to some of the wisdom Butch gained through his unique upbringing.